The sun had just dipped behind the Hollywood Hills when Kendall Jenner pulled into the driveway of her newly purchased home in Beverly Hills. It was a modest mansion by celebrity standards. Sleek, minimalist, built in the late 1920s, but renovated with modern touches. Glass walls, limestone floors, and soft, ambient lighting. The listing called it timeless, but as she stepped through the doorway, keys still warm in her hand, Kendall already sensed that something was off. The air inside the house was strangely cool, despite the summer heat. The lights overhead flickered once. Then again, she paused, her hand still on the switch. Maybe it was just the wiring. It was an old house, after all. But the silence that followed felt too deliberate, too thick, like the walls were holding their breath. Her interior decorator had done an impeccable job. Earth tones. She set her bags down by the entryway and did a quick tour. Everything was in its place. Modern art, crystal clear mirrors. But in the upstairs hallway, right outside the master bedroom, one mirror had a tiny smudge. It looked like a fingerprint, high up near the frame. Then shook her head. She was just tired. It wasn't on the surface. It was under the glass. Kendall frowned. She wiped it with her sleeve, but it didn't go away. She stared at it for a moment longer. The first few nights passed without incident. Mostly she sat up. No open windows. She blinked, confused, then laughed quietly at herself. "You're just imagining things," she muttered. No wind, except not quite. There was a sound, faint but unmistakable. The bathroom lights were off, but the sink was gushing. Steam rose from it, as though someone had been using hot water for a while. Water running, like a faucet left on. No pets, no people. She had been alone, completely alone. A figure, tall, pale, and still, just at the edge of the frame. She spun around. The sound came again, this time sharper, as if something had been knocked over. But on the fourth night, as she lay in bed, scrolling through her phone, she heard a loud thud from downstairs. She covered the mirror with a towel and went back to bed. Then another. She grabbed a robe and crept downstairs, heart ticking faster with every step. The living room lights were off. The kitchen was dark, but on the floor, near the island counter, was a shattered crystal vase. One of her favorites, and expensive. Shards of it glittered across the stone floor. Kendall stared at it. She picked up the shards carefully, tossing them in the trash, trying to ignore how cold the air had become. As she walked back to the staircase, she noticed something strange. The smudged mirror upstairs. She could see it even from here. That same print, but now it looked lower, nearer to the center. The next night, she woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m. The house was silent again. She got up, confused. She turned the knob. It stopped instantly. But behind her, in the reflection of the mirror above the sink, someone moved. No one. She stood there, staring at her reflection for almost a minute. The room around her looked normal. The shadows didn't move, but something in the mirror's depth felt deeper than it should have been. The morning after, she called the security company and had the cameras reviewed. There was nothing unusual, no movement. No. But when the technician pulled footage from the living room at 3:33 a.m., the video glitched. Just for a second. A single frame. But in that single frame, just before the glitch, someone or something stood at the bottom of the staircase, looking directly into the camera. Kendall didn't sleep that night. She called her mother the next day. Kreese was supportive, but dismissive. "Honey, it's probably just old wiring or stress. You work so much. Maybe take a few days off. Go to Palm Springs." Kendall considered it, but something in her gut told her she couldn't leave. It now resembled the full handprint. 5 fingers, 3 knocks. Slow, rhythmic, long, smeared. Not yet. Something about a child, about betrayal. The man raised his hand. The mirror shattered. That night, she lit sage and walked through the house, waving it through the air, trying to dispel whatever darkness had begun to cling to the rooms. The smoke curled in odd ways, avoiding certain corners, thickening near the mirrors. As she passed the hallway again, she paused. By that one mirror, the one with the smudge, the mark had changed again. She reached out and for the first time touched the glass. It was ice cold. Suddenly, a loud banging echoed through the walls. Kendall jumped, nearly dropping the sage bundle. It sounded like it came from inside the house, from the walls themselves. She backed away, whispering to herself, trying to stay calm. That night, she dreamed of the house before it was hers. In the dream, it was the 1930s. A woman stood in front of the mirror, brushing her long black hair. Behind her, a man in suspenders paced nervously. They were arguing. Kendall awoke with a jolt, her body soaked in sweat, her heartbeat loud enough to drown out the silence of the early morning. The air around her felt thick, almost humid, and there was a strange heaviness pressing down on her chest. She sat upright in bed, trying to make sense of the shadows shifting on the walls, but they offered no answers, only more unease. She was exhausted, but there would be no more sleep that night. As the sun rose and the house brightened slightly, Kendall reached for her laptop and began to dig. Something about the night before had crossed a line, what she had heard, what she had felt. She needed to know who had lived in the house before her, and why it felt so saturated with a presence that did not belong to the living. The public property records weren't hard to access, and within minutes, she was scrolling through a list of names and dates. One name, buried in the 1940s, pulled her in like a hook. Dr. Louis Bellwood, a psychiatrist who had owned the house for more than 2 decades. Further records revealed something more. Troubling his wife, Eleanor, had died inside the home. The cause of death was listed as suicide, though the details were vague. The official report stated self-inflicted wounds, but offered nothing further. No articles, no obituaries, no mention of a funeral. It was as though the event had been carefully erased from memory. Kendall dug deeper, pulling up archived news clippings and obscure blog posts from urban legend forums. Whispers emerged, stories from decades past, about patients of Dr. Bellwood vanishing under mysterious circumstances. There were rumors of hidden rooms, conducted in the basement, and a mirror collection that spanned nearly the entire length of one of the home's lower walls. Locals from the time had referred to the place with an eerie nickname, the Looking House. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through the black and white images, grainy photos of the home long before its renovation, showing windows that were no longer there and a long, empty hallway lined with what appeared to be covered mirrors. One article speculated that Bellwood believed mirrors could store memory, and that he was obsessed with preserving the energy of his patients. Others hinted that he had lost his grip on reality after his wife's death, convinced she was still living within the reflections. Kendall closed the laptop, her pulse still racing. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Whatever was happening in the house felt intelligent, deliberate. It had watched her, It had spoken, and now it felt as though it was beginning to reach through. She made a call to a woman named Sienna, a spiritual medium recommended by another model who had once mentioned casually that her New York apartment had been cleared of something that whispered through the healing vents. Now, the memory struck differently. At the time, Kendall had laughed, and black tourmaline, hand-wrapped sage bundles, thin sticks of incense bound in dried herbs. Sienna arrived later that evening, gliding into the house with a canvas bag filled with strange, tool-small clusters of quartz and a long necklace that looked older than anything Kendall had ever seen. There was something unnerving about how calm Sienna seemed, how unaffected she was by the atmosphere Kendall could barely breathe through. As she moved slowly through the house, Sienna said little. She walked barefoot, eyes closed at times, pausing at thresholds, murmuring under her breath. When she reached the second floor, she stopped abruptly in the main hallway and stared at the large mirror hanging at the end. Without turning her head, she said softly, "There's something tethered here, something old. It does not want to be seen, but it sees you." Kendall asked what she meant, but Sienna didn't answer directly. Instead, she walked closer to the mirror and placed one palm flat against its surface. She remained still for a long moment before whispering, and any available cloth over the reflective surfaces. "We need to cover the mirrors." It felt like they were sealing something in, or perhaps sealing themselves out. No footsteps, no whispers, no shifting shadows, just stillness, all of them. This is its anchor. It has been fed over time by fear, by attention, by years of silence. Every person who lives here leaves a piece of themselves behind. That's what it consumes. And now, it knows you. Sienna turned and looked directly into Kendall's eyes. Without hesitation, Kendall agreed. The two of them spent the next hour moving through every room, every hallway, draping bedsheets, towels, mirrors in bathrooms, decorative wall pieces. Even the tiny compact in Kendall's purse, everything was wrapped. As they worked, the house itself seemed to dim, as though the light from outside could no longer fully penetrate its walls. That night, for the first time in over a week, Kendall fell into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. But peace is rarely permanent in a house that remembers. The next morning, as light filtered through the curtains, Kendall walked cautiously through the hallway, unsure what to expect. At first glance, everything seemed as they had left it, but as she reached the foot of the stairs, her stomach dropped. The sheet that had covered the mirror at the end of the hallway was on the floor. The mirror was exposed. Drawn across its foggy surface, in letters made of condensation, were the words, "Do you see me now?" She stumbled back a step, heart pounding in her ears. Her mouth went dry. It hadn't rained. The windows were closed. There should have been no condensation, and yet the letters glistened, as though freshly drawn by an unseen finger. As she turned to leave the hallway, her eyes caught something more disturbing. Every room she passed, every wall-mounted mirror, every reflective surface was now uncovered. Every sheet had been removed, every towel pulled down. The house had undone their work overnight, and each mirror bore its own message. Some were scrawled faintly, others bold and dripping with a watery slickness that should not have existed. The words varied, but their meaning was chillingly the same. "Look closer. I am behind you. You are mine now." It was as though the house had waited patiently for Kendall to drop her guard, and now it was speaking in its true voice. Not through footsteps, not through flickering lights, but through the very glass that had watched every moment of her stay. The voicemail played, but her voice on the recording was distant and warped. It sounded like whispering layered behind her words. Unlike Chris, she believed her. She called Sienna again, panicked. But Sienna did not answer. Even during the first walkthrough, you said it gave you chills. Kendall grabbed her keys and fled the house. She drove aimlessly through the hills until she reached her sister Kylie's home. Kylie listened, wide-eyed and quiet. You always said that house felt weird, Kylie whispered. Remember? It looked exactly like one from the dream, black-rimmed, cracked slightly on the surface. A note was attached, but Kendall noticed something odd. In the reflection of the hallway mirror, the priest's face blurred, like static. Doors creaked. The air grew cold. The mirror in her guest room reflects something that shouldn't be there. A smudge, a handprint, a whisper, almost as still. Every mirror was clean. No writing, no smudges. Kendall stayed at Kylie's that night. When she returned the next day with a spiritual team and 2 priests, the house was completely still. The priests performed a cleansing. One of them muttered prayers in Latin. The other sprinkled holy water in every corner. When he turned, he was pale and sweating. In this house, does that want to be empty? He said. Later that evening, Kendall received a package at Kylie's house. No return label. Inside was a small antique hand mirror. It will follow the last one who saw. That night, even in Kylie's home, lights flickered. Kendall placed the mirror in a safe and locked it away. But even now, she sometimes wakes up at 3:33 a.m. She has moved homes since then, twice. But every place she lives in eventually remembers. And every mirror in time begins to reflect something other than her.